Hey guys, welcome to the shop. Now, this week I've got a little repair that we need to do. I think that's kind of unique and should be pretty interesting. I've got the motor that we need to put into the K&T mill. I've got it ready to slide in, so we can do that too. Actually put the big cutter grinder that I got from Dale Dairy in place of the old one and did some grinding on it. I want to share some results that I got on it with you, and if we're lucky, we'll start tearing into the big K&T and see if we can get that broken clutch shaft out. But I'm running short on time, so I don't know. We'll see how far we get. So let's get started. Alright, so just buttoning up my connections here, taping them up. I'm using splicing tape. I like it a lot better than the standard electrical tape. But if I use standard electrical tape, I like the 3M Super 88. This is the 130C. At least that's what it says. Just thick splicing tape. It tends to work better if it's cold. Standard electrical tape doesn't seem to hold very well if it's cold and it lets loose over time. This stuff, from my experience, seems to hold pretty well. So we're just going to button this up and then we'll slide this in here. Now, I don't have the belts for this yet, and I've heard horror stories about people running these machines backwards and damaging components. Supposedly, some of the, I don't know if it's this model in particular, but some K&Ts, if you accidentally run them backwards even for a second, from what I've read, they can damage the machine. So before we run this thing, we're definitely going to, with belts on it, we're definitely test rotation, because it's clearly marked on the casting which way it's supposed to rotate. Hopefully get this thing in here. It's kind of awkward and definitely heavy. There we go. Easy enough. So I did not fix the foot on this thing. A lot of people have asked, why I didn't fix it, and if I was going to, and the answer is no. The reason being is that, man, that's a thick foot, and it's really close to the windings on this thing, and I didn't want to risk getting them too hot and damaging them simply for a foot. I mean, it's going to have 3 half 13 bolts in it, which is more than enough to hold down 7.5 horsepower. I would like to have fixed it, but not a big deal. Alright, finished getting our door on. And I gotta work on the latch. It's needs the shaft repaired. The actual shaft and then a handle put on it. Feels good kind of to have this thing, some parts of it actually going back together instead of always coming apart. But there it is. Motor and door. I've got a neat little repair here that some of you may enjoy. Now, this is the frame to a small firearm, and it's got a broken pin I'm going to bring in to show you in just a second, but it's fairly heavy, so I think it's like just a cast metal. It's not aluminum, but something that you wouldn't be able to weld or anything, and without repairing this, the whole thing is junk. So let me bring in, show you what's wrong with it and my idea to fix it. Alright, here's a little closer look at the repair that we need to do, and hopefully you can see that there is a little circle there. Well, that's where this pin once was. I've actually got the broken piece to compare to, so that's nice. But you know, I pondered about this. How do you fix something like this? You really can't weld it or anything like that. And my plan is to, I've already center punched this lightly. I'm going to drill it and tap it 440, and then I'm going to make a pin to match this one that actually threads in. That way I can Loctite it in. Now we will, you know, drill through the frame, but it's better than having a non-functioning piece to begin with. So that's the plan to fix this. I'm going to be using the mini lathe and possibly the grinder to get this thing to the final OD. You know, not for sure yet. So let's go over to the lathe, the little lathe that I don't use very much, and get started making this pin. Alright, so there's our stock that we're going to be turning into a pin, and we're going to be using the little mini lathe for this operation. And I'd have to say, over time, this little thing, this little lathe, it's a 7 by 12 inch lathe, has growed on me over time. And I was skeptical of it at first, but I've done a lot of little pin repairs and stuff on this, and it's definitely convenient. It's easier than using the big lathe. I mean, my big chuck won't even grab on a pin that size. So we're going to turn down our major thread diameter. We're going to use a die with a die holder in the tailstock. Come in and cut our thread, and then we'll flip this pin and turn down our major pin diameter, and then we'll be done with the pin, and we can work on the frame itself. Let's see where we're at. We're looking for a major of about 110, 112. So we're 130, about 20 thousandths to remove. Not very much, really. The good thing about this little lathe is it has the speed to turn these little parts, where my large lathe max RPM is a little over 500 RPM. So these little pins, you really just can't spin them fast enough. So we're just going to be using a cheap little shop-made die holder, and hopefully we get a good thread. We should. So put it in the tailstock. Compound out of the way. I'm just going to leave the tailstock loose here. Slide it up on to the stud of oil, and then add some just pressure by hand, and then turn the chuck by hand also. I'm cutting this thread long on purpose so I can trim it to length when I'm done. I don't want it protruding out the side of the frame of that the piece we're repairing. But I want it long enough to go completely through the frame. Alright, now let's flip this die around and thread it all the way up to the shoulder. Alright, check that out. Pretty good. Threaded about as far up as it can be. And good clean threads. Well, I moved the little cutter grinder outside of my work area here for now, and I replaced it with the grinder that I got from Dale Dairy. Now, I've only done one job on this thing so far, and it turned out pretty good. I'm working on a miniature surface plate, little cast iron surface plate for a friend of mine. He wanted the top ground, the feet ground parallel, and then he wants me to hand scrape this thing flat. And it really done a great job. As long as I watch my traverse speed on this thing, it gives me a really good finish. The spindle's just not really heavy, and if I traverse really fast, it seems to affect the finish. That's just what I'm seeing. I don't know exactly what's causing a little bit of fish scaling, but I find that when I traverse fast, even with the other, this is the same head off of my little one, and even with this head on the other one, I would get the same result. So it's not from the actual machine itself. The finish is coming from the spindle. I think it has to do with the lack of rigidity in this high-speed spindle. I mean, it's got a Brown & Sharp number 5 taper holding this stone on, so it's not real rigid. But there's the little surface plate, pretty neat. Let me bring in, I'm going to show you how I ground this thing, and then we'll get set up, and I'm going to grind the rest of that pin down because I don't want to grab on the threads of that little pin we just made with the chuck. Probably be fine, but I want to use this machine too. Alright, so in order to grind this thing flat and get both the top and the feet parallel, I put my little mag chuck on here, and this being a cutter grinder, you don't want to keep a mag chuck on this thing all the time because you don't use it very often, or at least I don't. And to grind this thing in and take it back off and on would be pointless. You would lose the accuracy, unless it was in a fixed position. So what I did in order to get my top of my mag chuck true with the movements of the machine is I took a transfer block, a magnetic transfer block that I got from Tom Lipton. I put it on my surface or on my magnetic chuck. I ground it flat. Then I stuck the surface plate to it, ground the feet, but then I had 4 little pads here, the only thing that was holding this thing on, and with the magnet on, I mean, it's not enough to be safe. So dabbed a little super glue on each pad, super glued it down, and ground the top, and it worked out really good. Got it within a tenth, so I'm really happy with the accuracy of it and the finish. So now all I like to do is scrape this in. So I'm going to remove all this stuff. We're going to get our rotary fixture on here to grind that pin. We will dress our stone, and we'll grind that pin to size. Alright, to make sure I got this fixture on here straight and that I'm not going to grind a taper, just a mag base off the head, a ground bar, and then a tenths indicator, and then just 0, and then traverse. And you can see that just setting this thing on here, I mean, I'm way off. I may have ground a taper on purpose last time I used this. I just don't know. So every time I put it on here, if you're trying to do anything accurate, you want to check it. For as short a pin as we're doing, within a thousandth over 6 inches is all overkill. But I'm just doing this because I want to do it. Now I can, call it, it's far less likely to damage these threads than a chuck. Not that it really matters. I could have just chucked it up, spun it out, run a die up on it, and been done. But I want to use this machine. So we'll grind this pin to diameter, and then we'll work on the frame. Alright, so I'm set up to dress my stone, or to true it, and all I want to do is clean up the surface. That's all I'm trying to do from the last time I used it. And I've got my diamond dresser held in my universal grinding fixture. Now this is the way I like to do it, but I haven't been grinding long enough to tell anybody how to do it. I'll just show you how I do it. And this is what I do. Mount it on the table, and that way I can tilt my diamond, and I'm not just grinding right on the very tip of it, and I can rotate it every few times I use it. That way I keep my diamond in good shape, and it's been good ever since I've started doing this. I have not damaged a diamond, because they're really easy to do. They're really easy to damage. So let's clean up this stone. Come on, a vacuum. And we'll grind this pin in. Just gonna get under the stone here till I feel a little bit of debris coming off. I'm slowly moving, I guess you'd call it the, there we go, the Y-axis pin. Just move in maybe 1,000. That's really about it. Now, there's a lot of things about traverse speed and all that, but I'm not going to get into that because I'm not that well versed in it, because I don't do a lot of surface grinding, and I've just been actually grinding for a few months. So that's the way I do mine. Research it on your own, but this seems to work for me. Alright, so I'm looking for a pin diameter of about 97 thousandths. Going to go real slow on this thing because I'm not really holding it real tight. And this is not working well. The pin's just too long. I'm going to stop this. I'm going to cut off the excess because it's getting harmonic out there. Those little 448 threads, it's just not rigid enough, and it's vibrating against the wheel. So I'm going to have to adjust my setup here, shorten my pin just a little longer than what I needed in the end, and then we'll come back and grind it. Run into little issues like this. I'm not super experienced with this kind of stuff, so that's what I'm seeing. The pin's just getting harmonic and bouncing against the stone, so it's just too long. So I shortened this pin up, had it twice as long as it really needed to be. I'm going to choke it up in that collet as close as I can get it without running into my collet with a stone. Make sure I'm traveling in enough and adjust my stops. Okay. I think that looks good. Sounds a lot better. should be it. And we're dead on. It's good. There it is. Looks good. Let's prepare the frame. Check out this pen. Looks pretty good. Got a little chatter out towards the end because it's so long, and you know the grinding wheel would make it vibrate, but I think that's pretty good. Now we can screw that into our frame here. Once we drill and tap our hole, we can screw this in, Loctite it, you know, just probably hand file it to length because it's not, you know, critical, the length. It just needs to be this long, roundabout, and then we'll, you know, work the other side. We'll do that before we Loctite it so their threads don't protrude out the other side of this piece. Now, what I've done so far, I think, is been somewhat overkill. There's really no real reason to grind this other than I didn't want to hold on the threads. Alright, here's my setup to drill this side plate. And just got the plate mounted to an angle plate with a C-clamp, one C-clamp. It's a little rickety, but I think it'll be just fine for a hole for a 440 thread. Now, I was going to bolt it to this little angle plate, but this is the first time I've used it since I got it, and I come to find out that the holes that whoever made this thing, they tapped them 1224, and I don't think that I have a 1224 screw, bolt in this whole place, so I just went with the simple C-clamp. This thing has so many bosses on it, you have to hold it a certain way or it holds it at an angle. And I just dialed in my angle plate and then clamped it to it. Now to line up on my little center punch, I just made a little center punch in the center of the hole, or the center of the pin, just by eye. And to line up on that, I'm going to use my wiggler. This is my, you know, Brown & Sharp number 795 wiggler, and it'll allow me to center up the center of rotation of this chuck onto my little punch mark. So that's all I've done here. Get this rotation right. And then I just brought it down and moved the table until my punch mark was properly lined with it. So now I'm just going to use a little baby center drill to center drill it so I get a good start, and then we're going to drill it and tap it. Easy enough. Now I'll just use a tap in here and get it started straight, and it should be good enough. Alright, let's get it started. Loosen that off. that up. Now we'll run it down by hand with a little tap wrench. My little Moore and Wright Sheffield, England tap wrench. Love this little thing. There we go. Alright, so ready for the final assembly of this little pin. Just going to clean it up real good. Get all the oil off of it. And clean our hole out. And there's a little pin. It's a ground to size. I just did it on the bench grinder. No reason to do anything other than that. And put a little Loctite in these in the little hole. That's more than a little. This thing should be, it'll be probably stronger than the original, I would guess. Now that doesn't protrude, and now we got a pin back in the place of the broken one. So I would call that a successful repair. Here's a job that's going to be coming up in the future. It's a gear repair. We got 3 broken teeth off this cast iron gear. This is off of like a mobile home, not a mobile home, but like a camper that you drive around. And this operates one of the extensions, I guess, where the wall comes out. So I don't think these are that easy to get. And a friend of mine asked me to repair it, so I'm going to give it a shot. And we'll probably use the shaper for this. I'll grind a tool for it and then braze this up and cut it on the shaper. That's the plan anyway, so look for that. Guys, little look outside of the shop. My wife pulling in. Got some color change this year, but not as dramatic as it usually is. It was a really wet, warm fall, and supposedly, from what I read, that affected the color change of the leaves and stuff. So we didn't get, the color show we normally get, but still pretty. Won't be long; they'll be all down. Another week or so, and this will be a stripped hillside. If any of you guys have a GoPro Hero 4 or Hero 5, right around in there, that you'd like to get rid of at a reasonable price, I'm looking for one. I need something smaller that I can get some movable shots with. And they're fairly pricey if you buy them new, but a lot of people buy them used, or buy them, and they use them for a little bit, and then they decide it's not for them. So if you've got something like that and you would like to part with it at a reasonable price, email me, because I'd like to get something I can get movable shots and stuff with. With the camera I'm using now, it's like an earthquake if I move it. So keep that in mind. If you know where one's at, let me know, because I'm interested.